Stop dehumanizing Palestinians. I'm talking to you, the so-called pro-Palestinian activist. Yeah, you're dehumanizing Palestinians. You're robbing them of any kind of agency, responsibility, and frankly, you treat them as not as adults, not as responsible human beings. There are so many examples for this, how the so-called pro-Palestinian activists dehumanize Palestinians, treat them like they're toddlers, and pretend as if they have no responsibilities or abilities whatsoever. For example, checkpoints in the West Bank. You post about how horrible checkpoints in the West Bank are. I agree, they're horrible. I don't want them to exist. I don't want them to be in the West Bank, and no Israeli wants them to exist. You know why they're there? They're there because the Palestinian Authority, a self-governing authority that was given any capacity, means, and resources to self-govern, has failed to curtail terrorism coming from the West Bank into Israel. So yes, nobody wants any kind of checkpoints in the West Bank. The problem is the Palestinians have failed to put a check on violence and terrorism and firearms, and that's why Israel had to go back and put up checkpoints in the West Bank. Do you really think Israel prefers that its soldiers sit there in the West Bank rather than protect the vital borders on Lebanon, with Gaza, with Egypt? No, Israel would rather not be in the West Bank. Unfortunately, Palestinians have failed to self-govern. So when you say, oh, Israel's doing this and this to checkpoints, how bad, how terrible Israel is, no, the problem isn't Israel. The problem is the Palestinians not self-governing. When you're upset at what's going on with humanitarian aid coming into Gaza, that's not Israel's problem. That failure is the Palestinians, because they should have developed a mechanism that would allow for humanitarian aid to flow into Gaza with no concerns whatsoever that those trucks will be used for terrorism and to smuggle in bombs. But they haven't. So when you hate on Israel and you're like, oh my gosh, why isn't there more humanitarian aid into Gaza? You're treating Palestinians like toddlers. You're dehumanizing them. Because in fact, what you should be saying is, why don't the Palestinians create self-governance that allows aid to flow into Gaza with no problem? That's where your complaint should be. When you complain in the movies going for the Oscars, No Other Land, that Israel is doing this administrative mistake or that administrative mistake in the West Bank, yeah, that's a terrible thing. Israel should not be administrators for towns in the West Bank. You know who should? Palestinians. Unfortunately, instead of putting money and resources into administrative capacities that would allow for better lives, infrastructure, and resources for Palestinians, Palestinians have time and again chosen to put those resources towards terrorism, towards violence, towards pay for slave programs that reward terrorists for killing people like me. And so don't complain about Israel and stop treating Palestinian people like toddlers. They're not. When you complain about the number of Palestinians in Israeli prisons, you dehumanize the Palestinians. Why? Because you say they have no capacity whatsoever to run their own lives. If the Palestinian Authority would properly curb any kind of terrorist infrastructure in Jenin, in Ramallah, in Nablus, then Israel wouldn't be there. I cannot repeat this enough times. No Israeli soldier wants to be ruling over Palestinians. No Israeli soldier wants to be at any checkpoint in the West Bank. No Israeli soldier wants to go in the middle of the night to raid homes in Jenin or in Nablus. They don't want that. They do that because the Palestinians have failed to act responsibly. That's the issue.